Right, the purpose of this video is to show you how to turn something like this into something like that. First stage is to break off a lump of the clay, this is my method, and do a very large thumb pot, keeping the rim to a fairly even extent all the way around. And this initial start to the pot will determine its end shape. And then I put a base on it by simply stamping it down, making sure it's big enough to hold a pot that's going to perhaps zoom out at the sides. Once I'm happy with the initial shape, I then flatten out any finger or thumb prints that are around the outside so I don't have to do it later. And also I've pushed it down to get a nice base. Keeping your hand inside, I then put my what's called a chop or signature into the base. Stand it up, get it nice and firm, and at this stage I can now, with a little bit of slip, this is called slip, it's clay plus water on here, and center it on this wheel. Now this is not a throwing wheel, it's a banding wheel, simply for sort of turning and keeping the whole thing regular so you can work on it evenly. The next stage is rolling out the coil. Now you can buy machines to do this called pug mills, but it's a bit mechanical. I simply roll very carefully with the middle of my fingers, keeping an even pressure so that the clay comes out not too thin. You want a fairly robust coil, and then with the first coil you get it nice and thin at one end. So because I simply wind it up from the bottom, I don't put one on top of the other like the traditional school way of doing it. Now the thumb pot's on here. I've given it a good little tap down to make sure it sticks to the base, and then with an old toothbrush I score the top of that clay there, and of course add slip at the same time, which is just like glue, pottery glue. Then you pick up the coil, and the tapered end goes on first, and as I'm going to do a large bowl on the outside, bowling out rather, I'm putting the coil slightly, as I might be able to see, I'm not sure, slightly on the outside of the pot, all the way around. Right, the coil is on all the way around. I've now got to very carefully join the coils together by using a special tool, and on the inside you brush upwards, holding the clay on the outside so the coils don't separate as you're doing it. Once you've done that on the inside, you then, with another tool, you can use either a steel tool or a large rubber tool. For this one I'm using the steel because it's still quite a small area and I've got to get it inside comfortably. And with that you simply smooth out your lines that you've made to get a nice smooth finish on the inside, and it gives the pot an extra little bit of strength as well. Once you've done the inside, you then start on the outside, this time pulling the clay down, which will assure, or should assure, a good finish, a solid finish which shouldn't come apart in the kiln. Again, once the coils have been pulled together, using the larger one now, so I've got more space, and it's a softer touch to the clay. You get rid of any scrape marks, getting the clay as smooth as possible this all helps later on when it hardens up and you've got to make a decision about the shape, the end shape, how it's going to look. The pot is now ready. I've shaped it, cleaned it. It's now ready for its second coil. As it's been sitting for a little while, again, I will put some fresh slip around there. The next coil goes in and you simply pull it together like that, still on the outside and around. Right, the second coil can now be smoothed off. Again, the inside first, holding with the palm of your hand to keep the whole thing steady. Very therapeutic, this. You do have to concentrate, but you can end up on occasionally getting a stiff neck. Right, it's been pulled down and cleaned up, so what I'm going to do now is just very gently paddle it to get the right shape, because hand building, you've got a lot more scope really than throwing on the wheel. Throwing on the wheel is great fun, but boy is the clay in charge. Here I'm in charge. Okay, now that's reached its elastic state for now. If I put any more on, it would simply collapse. So what I'm going to do is give it a little kiss of slip on that top coil. Have another look down, make sure it's the shape I want to start with, and then cover that top bit with some cling film, but the rest of it overnight will harden up and I can work on it again tomorrow. Right, the pot has been here overnight and the side of the pot has hardened up quite nicely, so I can put more weight on it so it won't collapse, and the top has remained nice and sticky so I can carry on. Just to give you an idea, the video so far is 5 minutes long. The work I did yesterday that you saw took 35 minutes, so that gives you an idea of the time lapse that's going on. So once again, as it's been sitting overnight, a little lick of slip around the top like this, and the next coil up and on. Again, just pushed in very strongly and then smoothed onto the existing coil, and I'm still working outwards because I want to get a nice bowlish shape on the body of the pot, squeezing the next coil onto the one below, just watching the angle carefully all the way around. Once that's done, where I've run out of slip, just add a little bit more to ensure the attachment is working. But it's the squeezing part that is perhaps the most important area of this. There we go. Finishing off with a little smear down like that, just to ensure it's nice and solid. Again, adjust the shape, and then with the tool start to smooth off the marks of the coil, again resting the clay against your palm, thumb on the top to keep the coil nice and secure. Right, I finished off that first coil for today. I'm smoothing it off using the banding wheel to turn the pot, and it also allows me to see how accurate the form is. It's the line of the pot that's always the most important thing. You've got to get the line right. And it's ready for the next coil. Now here I'm going to start going up because I think I've gone out far enough, and I've got to be careful with the size. This is my measuring stick here. I can't go any bigger than that, any higher than that, because it simply won't fit in my little kiln there. So I am limited to size. A little bit more slip. The electric kiln, as I think I might have mentioned before, is the only, shall we say, modern or mechanical piece of equipment I use. I did start firing without that, going straight into the wood fire, but the breakage rate was phenomenal, and I got in touch with various other potters who've been doing this for a long time, and they all said, yeah, you've got to invest in an electric kiln, and I must admit it's made a hell of a difference. Virtually no breakages at all. It's because of the thermal shock. The clay just can't stand the intense heat of the wood burning down on top of it because it's fairly quick, whereas in the electric kiln it warms up very, very slowly overnight to 900 degrees centigrade and turns raw clay into brick-like clay, which is obviously much stronger. Now here I'm starting to go straight up. I'm not going outside anymore. I'm not bending out. I'm starting to bring the body of the pot into a more upright shape, and then I will decide what form the rest of it's going to be, whether it's going to be what's called a moon pot or a she pot. Scrape in there. Have a look down, have a look around, and again start smoothing up. I don't know whether I can go any higher at this stage still. I might leave it. This is early morning now. It's 25 past 11 in the morning, so I might leave it till this evening. By this evening it should be tough enough to start going up again, but I'll just carry on. Working on the outside now, so I'll do a little bit to let you listen to some of my favourite music. Okay, I can start smoothing off now.
You know, sometimes a song needs singing.
And, you know, I always work with music
Sometimes
on. It gives you a sort of rhythm, something to listen to while you're working. It's good
I
fun.
believe the best way to get this to you.
Right, finished smoothing. So, a little paddle, just to
Makes me want to
make
just get on a
sure
freight train and ride somewhere.
you've got a nice firm
Like there's something somewhere.
bowl shape
Saying,
at the
come
moment.
see about me. Check it out. You can feel it in your bones. Oh yes you can. You know a change is gonna come.
Okay, I'll sit there till tonight now, and I'll carry on a bit later. It's been here about 6 hours, so it's dried off nicely.
Everything has got to be right.
I'm going to start coming in now, so again a bit more slip, get it started, and a fairly thick coil now because I'm going to start squeezing in a lot. Start the same way, but this time the coil lays slightly on the inside, like this. to the rhythm of the music. And when I get to the beginning of the coil, a bit more slip because it's got to really stick this time. I've done the coils rather thick now because we're coming in and I can pinch them up, but it's difficult to get inside to smooth them off. So I'm just smoothing them off on the outside. You could just not bother doing it at all, really. I mean, a friend of mine, Dan Arbeed, a great potter, who used to live down in Wendon, made loads of pots very roughly with just massive great coils, and they look fantastic. And that was raku. Oh, well, no, he was stoneware firing for those, but you could also do it with raku firing, which is very similar to what I do at the moment. Right, so they've been smoothed off, and you can now start shaping because the coil is quite solid. And you can use one of these tools. There's several tools that you can use to just spin the wheel round and peel off to get a nice smooth finish. As I've said before, the most important part is the line. Got to get the line right, otherwise you just got a boring pot. And as it's starting to go in now, I've got to do the same as I did at the beginning and leave it, otherwise it will just collapse on itself. So I'm going to leave that now till tomorrow, and should finish the basic shape by tomorrow quite easily. We'll see. I'll just carry on here for a bit. Pedal. I'll sit down for this so I can see it side on. Get that nice curve. Okay. Carry on tomorrow. Finishing touches now, really. You can see the shape. I've only got to finish the top. I think I've decided what I'm going to do. Still play it by ear a little bit. Okay, here we go. Going right on the inside now, pulling in, almost closing the top up in a way, and then I can cut a hole for the neck. If I'm going to have a neck, I'm not sure yet if I'm going to have a neck or not really, but we'll see. Right, just finishing off now, showing you the final touch before I think I'm going to put a neck on it, and maybe a couple of little handles, just to show you how far you can go. You don't have to do that, it could just be left with a nice top. I'll show you some pots later anyway. But I'll show you the technique that I've got to use now, which is very delicate, almost like being a surgeon. I have to insert a little scapula there and smooth off using that instead of my finger, because my hands are obviously much too big to go inside. and it helps me get the shape as well. And with this inside, you can still maneuver the clay around, you know, shove it around to get the shape that you want. Right, I've taken a pot to its finish now in terms of shape, just patting it down to make a nice round shape. This will change a little bit when it gets what's called leather hard. I'll be cutting into it, shaping it a bit more. But the next stage that I'll be showing you is I'll be putting on a neck and maybe a couple of little handles as well. Just to show you how it's done. But yeah, I'm quite happy with this so far. It could explode in the kiln, but there you go. As you can see, I've more or less decided on a shape. I'm going to put this. I've put this neck on and a small lid. Still very wet, so I can't do much to that at the moment. I also want to put a couple of little handles here. So while this has got to leather hard now, I can start shaping using the banding wheel to help me, like this. I mean, this is a cheese grater, in fact, to get the bulk of it off. And just very slowly pull the whole thing down, like this. Down to the bottom, and then you smooth off with a steel or a knife, get those grooves out of the way, which is quite easy to do. Just take your time, don't rush it. Okay, right, the next time you see this, it will be ready for burnishing. It's got to dry now for at least a week, if not more. And I would have put the handles on it, and you'll see it more or less in its finished state before we hit the bonfire. Right, as you can see, the clay is dried out quite nicely now. It's been sitting here for about 3 or 4 days, and the next stage is to sand down any bumps or lumps or discrepancies. I've got about 5 different grades of sandpaper here, sandpaper bars, and I work on a towel because, again, it's very fragile, it's still raw clay, so I've got to work quite carefully. And I also obviously have to wear one of these because of the dust. You start off with a fairly strong one, and you can see how effective it is for sort of levelling off certain areas like this. And then when I finish this, I simply brush off the dust onto a hard surface, which I can then collect and use again. It goes into a bag like this here, and some water added to it, and over time it turns back into a clay. This entire pot has been made from reclaimed clay. Right, the pot's been sanded down. I'm quite happy with the effect now. Again, working on a towel because it's still just raw clay. The first thing before burnishing is to cover the whole pot with oil. You can use baby oil or whatever. I use vegetable oil, and it gives the clay a nice smooth finish when you start working on it. if you go straight onto raw clay without doing this first, you can still get the sort of effect you want, but it's not quite good enough for me. So I get the clay prepared first, all over with oil, just like this. Smaller pots, I simply use my hands to cover it up. With a big pot like this, you've got to be a bit more careful. And you leave that on there until it dries. And you get the second stage coming up in a minute. Right, this has been completely covered in oil and is drying off fairly slowly, which is fine. I know the time doesn't matter. So that will sit there for a while. That's what it looks like, all oily. The next stage is a wet finger. Right, the oil is dried up and the clay is ready for the last little bit of touching up before I burnish. This is just ordinary water, and what it does now with the oil already on there is give the whole thing a nice smooth finish, and you just very carefully wipe round. There's also something called terra sigillata which you can use, but I prefer to do it this way. It's longer and more demanding, but I don't mind that. And also you can smooth off any remaining bumps, because sanding can be very, very awkward, getting inside all the little bits, but with your finger you can finish off very nicely. So I've got to do the whole thing, let it dry, and then I will show you how to burnish. Right, the pot's completely dry now. It's been sanded down and the burnishing starts. Now I use three main tools for burnishing. The first one is this stone. This gets rid of any really rough bits and starts binding the platelets of the pot together, which not only gives it a nice smooth shiny finish but makes it much stronger as well. And then I go over that with glass, an old light bulb, ideal, and it's just a long, again, very, very careful job, because it's still raw clay. Right, this is more or less finished now. It's got a nice shine on it. If I hold it up under the light, you can probably see the shine now. Instead of being all dull, it's got a nice strong surface over it. Very pleased with that. That's ready for the kiln. Right, this is the small electric kiln. Superb piece of equipment. It can go right up to over 3000 degrees centigrade, but I don't need that sort of temperature. I only need to go up to 900 for biscuit firing, and I can program that now. This is the programmer here. I can program now to come on at midnight, so it'll only come on during economy 7, so I don't spend too much on electricity. It'll be on for at least 7 hours, going up very slowly, and then I have to leave it for another day to cool down. So this goes in. Close the lid. It does fit, jolly good. And I normally fire more than one, obviously, but for this particular video I'm just doing one because I've got enough stock at the moment. When this is done, I will then show you how to dress the pot, and then we'll go to the exciting bit outside with the big barrel of wood fire. Brilliant. As you can see, the pot's now come out of the kiln, nice and hard, brick hard, so it won't dissolve in water or anything like that. So it's ready for dressing, which I've done. You can see various bits and pieces here. All I can tell you is that it's a little bit of seaweed, a little bit of dried fruit peel and garden peel, which has been soaked in salt. It's very important to soak it in salt, and then dried again, obviously, and then fixed onto the pot. I'm not going to say anything else, because if I told you any of the secrets, I'd probably have to kill you. Okay. As you can see, it's all wrapped up now. This is salted cloth, as I explained before, and again dried, obviously. The salt plays a very, very important part in the whole glazing process. Right, I've got to wrap this now in a foil. It gives it a sort of makeshift sagger. A sagger is a protective shield which will protect it from the wood, because if it just goes into the wood, it'll come out black. So I've got to be very careful there. Right, as you can see, this is fully wrapped up, and that's now ready for the wood kiln, and we have to go outside for that. So this is my pit. I've got sawdust in the bottom, and I've got very fine kindling around the pot. The pot's sitting there now. What I'll do now is I'll put the barrel on. And now I will fill this up with a lattice work of wood before I put any heavy wood on, so when the ash goes down it won't damage the pot too much. But I won't be firing this till tonight, so I'll see you in about 6 hours. Okay, from a different angle you can see that the kiln is full of wood now, and it's time to start lighting up. I always fire from the top down. The reason for this is because although the pot has been biscuit fired, it could still be vulnerable to thermal shock. So the whole thing burns down from the top, slowly down, warming the pot up, and then it gets the intense heat to give it the glaze. This will be here for about 40 minutes. As you can see, I've got some barricades here for my runner beans and onions. I don't want them nuked. And this is picking up now, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes to see the blaze. Well, as you can see, this is the burn. This will go on for about 40 minutes. If you look at the side of the barrel here, you can see how far the heat has gone down. The top third now is completely black. So that means that the heat has got there. When it gets halfway down, I then put the lid on. Okay, the middle third is starting to go black now, which means it's halfway down. So I can start to think about putting the lid on, which will concentrate the heat down onto the pot. The pot at the bottom should be hot enough now to take any thermal shock. Okay, that's really the end of it all. The chimney is on, as you can see, and the bottom is getting very, very hot down there. Should be good. So we'll leave it there, and I'll see you in the morning. Right, as you can see, I've got rid of the lid. I've now got to take the barrel off. I can see inside, it looks as though it's survived. Carefully lift it up. And there we have it. But the next stage is to clean it up and give it a good polish. Okay, this is the finished pot. This is the last bit of the video, so you can all relax a bit. I finished polishing, as you can see. I've got a nice big fluffy brush all the way around. It's come out not too bad. It's got a few cracks on it, but that's all part of the personality of the pot, really. Okay, that's it. You'll be seeing this anyway in a minute. I'll put that down there. Just to finish off, I ask visitors now and then what do they reckon was the most important part of my equipment here. We've got the slip, we've got the measurer, we've got all the cutting tools, the paddle, etc, etc. They always get it wrong, and they always get it wrong because the most important tool here is this. Keeps the dust off my beer. Cheers.